in terms of like the sparking curiosity, it's different for my 12s, I find, than for my 9s. For my 9s, I feel like I can grab your jumping frogs or one with the water balloon, and I can think of lots of things like that, and I can find little videos. But for my 12s, I just don't have that kind of
Today we bring
resource or
back
that kind
Carmen
of,
Sinatra
I don't
from
know
Richmond
if
Hill,
it's just
Ontario.
me
Carmen is
or
back
if
in the
it's
classroom with
my
COVID
natural way of
protocols
sort of
firmly in
getting
place and
them
shares
into
what it has been like teaching from a distance online and preparing for the part of her schedule where she'll be teaching from a distance, face to face.
By sticking around, you'll hear us chat about 2 benefits of our new all-day math blocks and what we can do with senior students who typically learn abstract math concepts and how to spark their curiosity. This is another Math Mentoring Moment episode where we talk to a member of the Math Moment Maker community who is working through struggles, and together we brainstorm possible next steps and strategies to overcome them.
All right, cue up the music.
Welcome to the Making Math Moments That Matter podcast. I'm Kyle Pierce from tapintoteenminds.com.
And I'm John Orr from mrorr-isageek.com. We are 2 math teachers who together,
with you, the community of math moment makers worldwide who want to build and deliver math lessons that spark curiosity,
fuel sense making,
and ignite your teacher moves. John, are you ready to dive into, I think this is episode 102 of the podcast?
Yes, we are pumped for that. Over 100 episodes under our belt. I can't believe it. We want to take a few minutes to say right now that the 2nd annual Make Math Moments virtual summit was a huge success. We had over 20,000 teachers register, and a huge portion of those people attended live.
If you attended, then you know what powerful messages have been shared, great resources for your classroom that were shared and given out, and I'm sure you walked away rejuvenated to keep making math moments that matter for your students. If you didn't attend, then something big must have come up this past weekend, or you know about the replays happening this week and you've already scheduled them into your busy schedule.
That's right. If you're listening to this episode the week it went live, which is Monday, November 9th, 2020, then you'll have until this Friday, November 13th, 2020, to watch any and all of the 36 sessions that aired over this past weekend.
Holy smokes, 36 sessions. If you visit makemathmoments.com/summit right now, you can watch those sessions like Kanika Turner's session on making math class safe again, or Chris Lesniak's Up for Debate talk, or you could dive into Dan Meyer's session on connected and creative classrooms in a time of crisis, plus 33 other hour-long sessions hitting different big ideas from kindergarten through grade 12 and beyond.
After November 13th, 2020, all the sessions will then go inside our Make Math Moments Academy for our members to binge watch all year long. If you're not a member of the Academy yet, then you can still join over at makemathmoments.com/academy.
That's right, my friends. And you get your 30 days free, your first 30 days free to gobble up those sessions. So maybe you want to go a session a day for 30 days, or maybe you want to stick around for the whole year long to dive into that summit, plus the 9 other courses and all of our teacher guides and units for your classroom. Head on over to makemathmoments.com/academy to dive in and become a member today.
All right, now let's get on with our discussion with Carmen.
Hey there, Carmen. Welcome back to the Making Math Moments That Matter podcast. This is another Math Mentoring Moment episode, and we were just chatting before we went live and sort of restating that typically we don't bring people back so quickly, but back on episode 92, we were chatting about kind of getting ready for this very uncertain school year start during COVID-19. And we had a great chat, and we thought, you know what? let's bring you back on a lot sooner, like not like a couple months sooner than we normally do, but more or less like a couple weeks later. So we are recording this about a month to the day from when we recorded our original episode. And we're dying to know, how are you doing and what's going on in your world right now that we are just into the new school year here in Ontario?
Well, so I'm at Richmond Hill High School in Richmond Hill, and our time has been very interesting the first few weeks. Very uncertain, like you said at the very beginning. I kind of feel like the last week or so, in particular this week, I finally started to feel like I'm settling in a bit into, okay, this is how it's going to go. But our structure for dealing with COVID-19 is we have one live class in the morning, and it's 2.5 hours. And that class is a maximum of 15 students. And then in the afternoon, the rest of the classes are online for approximately 50 minutes. I think I said 40 the last time, but the reality is it's scheduled for 50, but by the time we actually get everybody on and doing what we need to do, it's
Turn
basically
off all the
40.
mics
Right,
and all that wonderful
exactly.
stuff.
Yeah. And then we switch cohorts every day. So there's 2 cohorts, and the following day it's the same class, but different kids, like the other half of the kids. And we do that for about 2 weeks. And then we switch to a different face-to-face class.
Right. Like a different course.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Interesting.
So, yeah,
go
it's
ahead.
interesting because I don't have a period 1 class. So the last time we did a lot of talk about how we're going to deal with the face-to-face class, and then I haven't had one yet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. It just happened that way. I didn't realize with the schedule that was going to happen.
So you having your prep period, your preparation
Yes.
period first,
Yes.
does that mean that first 2 weeks, this being, is this your second week you're in right now?
Second week of the kids being there, other than
Right.
we did
Right.
start on September
Right. Same as us.
9, 10, 11. Yeah.
So
Well,
those
only
2
with 9s.
weeks would have been your period 1, but you don't have a period 1. So are you just prepping and then helping the online kids in the afternoon?
Yeah. So then my 3 classes, I have them in the afternoon. So I have them like 2, 3, 4 right straight. So 12:55 straight through to 3:30 about, I'm online with my classes.
I'm curious just because I'm trying to compare to my system, what we're doing, because we're also in week 2 into the school year with students. I also had period 1 prep. What I did the first week, because we have a different kind of system than you, but I was moving around covering teachers from class to class. So I was kind of a substitute teacher for all the first week, going into a class to give that teacher a break, to give them their prep period. So I guess I should give why that needs to be the case. So I think the last time we chatted, I had kind of shared that I was going to be in a somewhat similar situation to you with my students, that we would have this 2.5 hour block of math in the mornings, and then we'd have a different 2.5 hour block with a different course in the afternoons. And then we were doing that every day for a quadmester. And they changed that about a week before we were back to school. And now what we're doing is we're doing a 300 math block. So basically all day with your class. So you teach your period 1 class or your first week of school. Every day that week is with the same group of students for the whole day. So from 8 o'clock till about 2:20, 2:30, where they're in that math class doing math that whole time. And so we were just saying before we hit record that there's some good sides to that and bad sides to that, but the kids are like, their brains are just ready to explode doing math for 5 hours straight. And you can imagine what that might look like for different teachers. But because I had first period prep, I didn't have my class that week. And so all the teachers, since they're on duty all day long with their students, they aren't actually given a prep period during that time. So we kind of organized a schedule, us math teachers, where I was the one on prep. I would go into a math class and give that teacher a 76-minute break where they would go and have a preparation time to plan their next day or later that day. And then I would take that class for 76 minutes and do whatever the teacher wanted me to do. It could have been, last week was the first week we did it. So it looked kind of like, here's a lesson on linear relations. Good luck. And I got it the moment I walked in the door.
Oh
or
my
it was,
gosh.
we just did some lessons all day and now it's just practice time. And so it was me giving one-on-one help. Sometimes it was can you fill this time?
They
Why don't you just
hand
do
over the
whatever?
chalk.
Yeah, so
like,
we
"Go do
had some
something with this."
discussions on some math ideas that aren't, say, curriculum based. We played some math games, but yeah, that's what I was going through. But I was
How
curious.
often do you rotate?
So yeah, every week we would then, so that's week one
Mhm.
would be your period one class all day. And then the next week, like we're in week 2, is now period 2.
Oh my
And
gosh.
you would have that class all day. And then, so you wouldn't see, once your week was over
Mhm.
with that class, you don't see them for a week. And then,
Wow.
because you have a different group, and then you'll flip flop week 1 to week 2 for the quadmester. So
Wow.
till like November.
It's so strange to me how all across this province, there's so many different models. It's amazing how we all have to kind of figure out how to work our own model and just that's what we're given. So there you go.
Well, I guess that was a long-winded explanation there, but it kind of came from the ideas. I just wanted to ask you about your prep period. Like, so you don't have to do any sort of like cover another teacher and give them a break during their 2.5 hours. I'm guessing no, because they have the afternoon to be online.
No, we haven't. We've had sort of, we're going to say regular on-calls, like if a teacher is away, and it has happened. If the teacher's away, then we get an on-call like we normally would, but they're only like a quarter of that period. So, kids can have 4 different teachers coming in for their on-call.
That's true. Yeah, 35 minutes here and every
Yeah,
35 minutes
yeah.
or something.
And hall duty, things like that. But no, the 2.5 hours, I have to admit, has been pretty nice. And I'm concerned because next week I will not have that, because next week I'm starting the period 2 class for 2 weeks. I've heard from other people in the department who have, just other people in general who don't have that period 1 off, and they just seem to be a wreck almost, because you do the 2.5 hours, then we have about, well, from 11:20,
lunch.
11:30 until the first class in the afternoon starts around 1 o'clock, 12:55. And then somewhere in there, if you taught period 1, like in the morning live, then you would have one of the 50-minute blocks you would have free.
Right. Got it. It's so interesting to me how all of these different models across the province, in some ways, I find the ministry here in Ontario, the Ministry of Education, they do give a lot of autonomy to districts. I think we chatted a little bit in the last episode about how they rejected a lot of the initial plans, and it made you sort of wonder why they didn't maybe hone in on, hey, listen, it's got to be within these particular parameters or whatnot. But it's just so interesting, the different models, and trying to think of the pros and the cons. And I don't know, even if I was sitting there and your district said to you, you can pick any of these different models. I've heard many of them out there. My district's in a slightly different model than John's, where the afternoon is online, but it's with a different cohort. So it's not as many classes as you're dealing with, Carmen, but it's not one class like John's dealing with. So it's kind of like somewhere in between.
Right.
I have no idea which one I would rather.
I don't know either. I know that there's ones that I would not want. I kind of have to say, John, I don't think I would want the one that you've got.
We're in third day. There's some good and bad. And actually, I was just having this discussion with a teacher at lunchtime about the good that kind of comes out of it. Now, don't get me wrong. Obviously, I would love to go back to our original system, but having the kids all day and knowing that they're going to be with me, it kind of gives me some freedom to stretch certain lessons out when I always was crunched to get, say, a consolidation or a connect stage in, just to wrap it up before the bell, because you've always got those lessons where this lesson runs long, but this lesson runs short.
Yes.
And you're like, because you have all day, you can play with that. So it's like, okay, we're going to stretch this past where I would normally go, and then I'll shorten that one up over there. That part's been really nice. And then that's one of the 2 things I was talking about today with the teacher. And the other one was about students who generally might fall through cracks. This happens, right? So it's like you have a 76-minute block. And then for those of you who have taught 60-minute blocks or even shorter, the act of having that hour and having, say, a class of 30 or somewhere between 25 and 30, whatever class number you have, it's possible that there's a student there that just, say, doesn't answer a question that day, or says, I'm just not going to participate that much for this hour. I'm just going to coast through. Like, there's kids that hide a little bit. And it seems like they can get away with that because it's only 76 minutes. They might not, like, I'm not going to participate. And they make that choice to say, tomorrow I will. But then, the next day comes and then they don't participate fully that day too. And it kind of snowballs. But when you have them all day,
they can't hide.
They can't
There's no
hide.
hiding.
And
I'm coming for you.
yeah, well, they can't hide, and they know that they can't just opt out of math just for the 1 hour that they normally would have it. So what I'm finding is those kids that have been shy and kind of might have opted out before are participating, and they're doing their work, and they're actively involved in discussions. And I have a feeling they're going to benefit from this situation.
It's always good to look at the positives, right?
Yeah, you know what? And especially during challenging times, you really do have to. And the one thing I'll say as well, just knowing from the teachers I've worked with in my district, my wife's a teacher. She's in elementary. So she's all the kids are back and they're doing everything but at a distance. And so she's having her own struggles. And when you just see educators are figuring it out. Like, we knew everyone would, but initially there was a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, probably still a lot of stress and anxiety, but everyone is coming together. They're figuring it out. And when I say figuring it out, like John said, it's not like it's just like it was or like we would like it to be, but making it work and doing the best with what they can. And I think that's beneficial. And that's the one thing too that John was saying about being able to stretch your lessons, to play with the clock a little bit during the day a little more. It's kind of like what a lot of elementary teachers have that benefit. The downside is you're with the same group all day. So if you have a group of students or a student who is really kind of driving you bonkers for whatever reason, you don't have that 75 minutes where you get to kind of hit the reset button and try to take a deep breath and go again. So there's some of those negatives there as well. But on the positive side, yeah, you really do get to manipulate the day a little bit and make sure that you have a conversation with every student at some point that day, where it's really easy to miss that in shorter periods. So
yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to next week. I get to officially meet my 9 applied students, and they've been great online for the most part. There's a few who, honestly, I have had one student who's come once, and I don't know exactly what the issues are. I think it's a lot of tech issues, and some of them, they just don't know how to get on a Google Meet. They just don't know how to set up the Google Classroom. I have a couple of other students who, they just arrived in Canada not that long ago. So it's completely foreign to them how this is all working. And I'm looking forward to having that opportunity to have them in my class, because I suspect, there's more there when we're just talking online and they're not talking because they don't know how to speak English. Then it'll be really good to have them in class, and I'll be able to interact with them. And my class is very small to begin with. It's 15. And they're still splitting them up into 2 cohorts. So I'm going to have 7 on one day and 8 on the other. And I was actually given the option to not split them up and to have them all together and just come every other day. They're not allowed to come every day because then they would be mixing with the other group. And the whole point is to keep groups apart. And I said, no, let's split them this time. And part of my reasoning is simply because I want to catch those kids who I haven't talked to much, and I'll have that opportunity, like 2.5 hours, a lot of time, and only 7 kids or 8 kids. I'll be able to hopefully get them on the ball and caught up and see what they're really thinking about the math.
Right. Yeah, for sure. That's a wise move to separate them. Actually, I did luck out. So my grade 9s that I have right now this week, normally my class size did shrink because I think some opted to go online, and then they did not reshuffle my class to kind of lump with another class, thankfully. So I end up only having 11 on my class list right now. And I've had a few not show so far. So basically over this week, we've had 8 regular kids every day in that class, which has been awesome to work with 8 every day, all day. Like I said, they can't hide anywhere, especially because there's 8. And then they're on the ball. They're working hard all day, even though by the end we can see it in their eyes that they're math filled.
Well, Carmen, the last time we chatted, we discussed all kinds of, of our wonders and even our worries and our just trying to get ourselves prepared for this COVID situation. And because you have that first prep and you haven't actually interacted with some students face to face, we might not be able to kind of dive into some of the things that we chatted about back then, but maybe we can chat about some of those same challenges or maybe different challenges online. Last time we were chatting about some of these ideas, like, for example, having double the time compared to normal class time, and how do we safely use vertical non-permanent surfaces? And actually, John and I were chatting before we hit record tonight, and Peter Liljehal actually messaged us after your episode went live and said he had listened and then he wanted to have a chat. So we just recorded another episode with Peter. So that'll be going live soon as well. I don't know if it's before or after this episode goes live. So it struck a chord with him as well. And how do we make groups safely? And then we talked a little bit about consolidation prompts. And I'm wondering if we think about what you've experienced over this past week and a half or so with your online classes, I'm wondering what's on your mind now or currently. And maybe first we can even start with what sort of successes. Do you have a success you can share from your experience in the online space? And maybe it was something that surprised you and you didn't anticipate would work as well as it did.
The online has been interesting. I've had my ups and downs. Definitely have had some moments of success, though, for sure. My nines just seem to be like such a friendly bunch. I was just, my pleasant surprise, I guess, is that sometimes they just have no inhibitions, the grade nines. They get online, they don't care, they're talking, and then get to the grade 12s, and it's like, I'm talking to a void. Nobody wants to say anything, and they're all afraid to speak. But my nines don't seem to be overall. They're nice in the chat and they get on, they say hello. One time it was so nice. There was a student who didn't want to talk. I said, you can unmute yourself and just explain what you did. And he goes, no, I'm too scared or something, too shy. And then another girl just unmuted herself and said, oh, don't worry, we're all nice. And I just thought, oh, that's so nice, And since then, he doesn't talk still, but he definitely types. So that's nice. I've had some really great successes with breakout groups and doing the breakout extension. It was pretty shaky at first, but I did a breakout group with my 12s, and I have 2 sections of MHF. And that was really good. I enjoyed that a lot. I got a Jamboard out for everybody, actually 1 Jamboard. And then how did I structure it? I created the teams beforehand, and then you put links up to other Google Meets that they go to. And so they have their own little group that they can talk with. And on 1 Jamboard, I had like 12 different slides, 1 for each group. And I was able to broadcast out to all of the teams and say, okay, this is what I want you to try and do, and this is what I want you to discuss. And yeah, by the end of it, I was like, all of their boards were full. I could see that they were talking to each other. It was really good. My only problem with that was that the time went so fast and I was so tight at the end. So that's been a great success. And I did jumping frogs with my grade 9s. That was fun. And there was another one that I did. It was jumping frogs and I forgot, but there was another one that I did with my 9s that was really good too. But yeah, we've had a lot of fun with doing some of those engagement activities. And that's been the highlight when I do my online. Because if it's just me going through a lesson, sure, it gets the job done, I suppose, but can be kind of boring.
Right. We chat about that often. Like, you could technically do any lesson faster and to the point by just telling them what it all means and giving them what they need to know. But we know that that's not going to make a math moment that matters, and it's not going to fuel any sense making. They can't make those connections if you're just going to do that. That's when kids say, why do I need math? And I don't see the purpose of this, because they didn't actually have any meaning or value attached to any of that learning. You just gave it to them instead of them earning it and feeling like there was a success there on on their own end. And so we often talk about that, of trying to make that happen in your class so that students go, yeah, I got something, and like, it was me. And that's important aspect of learning. So those are some awesome successes, I think, that we can all like pull a success from our day. And I think that's important to continue to think about. Carmen, I'm wondering, like, if we dig down a little bit in the sense of what are you kind of struggling with, or what's a kind of a problem of practice right now in this current situation that you'd like us to kind of just brainstorm and hash out here for the next 15 or 20 minutes. And then we can maybe bring you back on a little later and keep having these conversations as a kind of like a regular thing. But what would you like to kind of chat about right now to get the ball rolling, to kind of address something about your current classes?
There's kind of two things. I think I'm going to talk more about one because I think I have a handle on one of them a little bit better. So I'd mentioned with my grade 12s that I did a great breakout group, and that was fun. It was a lot of fun. I always feel like I have trouble in general with the grade 12, like this is as advanced functions, in terms of like the sparking curiosity. It's different for my 12s, I find, than for my 9s. For my 9s, I feel like I can grab your jumping frogs or one with the water balloon, and I can think of lots of things like that, and I can find little videos. But for my 12s, I just don't have that kind of resource or that kind of. And I don't know if it's just me or if it's my natural way of sort of getting them into the lesson is where I used to be. Okay, here you go. I'm going to tell you everything about remainder theorem, factor theorem, whatever. I tend to do a lot of, okay, you guys try this, you do it. And that works nicely when I was in the classroom and I could have them up on whiteboards and I could see them. But it is tougher to manage online. And so that's how I usually go about it. But are there kind of sparking curiosity ideas you guys have for grade 12s?
This is definitely a common struggle that we hear from educators, especially our senior division. So that'd be like your grade 11 and 12 teachers are saying a lot of those same things. And what about, and if we were to maybe compare and contrast, and I know it's nice when you have, for example, some of the Make Math Moments units or studies like jumping frogs. We didn't really elaborate earlier, but jumping frogs is one of our Make Math Moments tasks that we design with that sparking curiosity in mind in order to fuel that sense making. And so I'm wondering if you were to look on and sort of weigh out when you do your grade 9 task, whether it's using jumping frogs or whether it's using any other task that seems to sort of draw students in. And when you're doing this with your grade 12s, and it sounds like, again, like more of this online space is where you're feeling this, the hurt. Yeah, exactly. It's just stinging a little bit more. Mm-hmm. What would you say is different, maybe fundamentally, about how the lesson unfolds? Like if you could paint us maybe a picture, and then maybe we might be able to land on maybe some elements that maybe are happening in one that aren't in another, or vice versa.
One of the fundamental differences, obviously, between 9 and 12 is the level of difficulty of math. And the other video I got from you guys was Fast Clapper. That was another one. And they love that one. It's so simple, it's fun. And I guess maybe that's something I'm thinking about, is that it's a very simple task, and also it's ratios and proportions. I feel like you can find so many things, talk about so many things with that. And then when I get to advanced functions, I mean, it's just a different kind of kettle of fish. I don't know how to explain it. There's that time intensity too. Like the kids are, okay, we have to cover all these topics. And I know we want to uncover curriculum, and I get that too, but I feel like that's kind of the big difference, and I don't know how to get around it.
Yeah, I'm super glad you brought up the Fast Clapper, which is actually, it's not our task. It's a task by Nathan Kraft, which we kind of adapted a little bit to kind of generate a little bit more curiosity, a little bit more kind of following the curiosity path. But great task from Nathan. He's definitely provided lots of 3-act tasks over on his websites too. So Awesome stuff there, the fast clapper task. We'll put that one in the show notes to Nathan's site. But let me ask you this, Carmen, because I get where you're going with that. Hey, these tasks in grade 9 are very practical. There's so many real world situations in grade 9 because the grade 9 curriculum here in Ontario is heavily weighted on linear relations and proportional reasoning. And so much of what we see in our world is proportional or has a linear relation built into it. So it makes a lot of sense that we can find stuff there. But then when we move to grade 12, all of a sudden we're dealing with, like you said,
polynomial functions.
Polynomials, and we're doing trigonometry with radians. And then all of a sudden we're now into logarithmic functions and doing all the algebra around all of that stuff too. And so
how could you not be drawn in?
Yeah. And so I get what you're saying. So that's like context. But Kyle and I sometimes will say like context matters sometimes, but then sometimes it doesn't. So I'm thinking like if you can think about the jumping frogs activity or the fast clapper activity, and if you think about the beginnings of those, and if I took context out, which is hard, like if you have to think about, okay, let's take context out. What is it about, say, those tasks that draw kids in if we say it's not about the thing or the actual real worldness? What's going on behind the scenes that kind of makes kids want to keep going with the math?
I think for both of those, what I liked about was the element of estimating and guessing and saying, what do you think? And like no worries about, are you going to get it right or not? And is he going to beat the record? I don't know. It was something about that being able to kind of estimate that they really liked. And with fast clapper, they just were in awe. They thought, wow, that's so cool. Look at this guy. He's going really fast.
Yeah. I think I got to agree. And Kyle and I have chatted about that many times, that I think we kind of get glossy-eyed when we see the videos and we think, okay, that's a cool situation. But a lot of the times you can boil it down into thinking that these things withhold information. They don't give everything up front, just like a scary movie or a mysteries novel. Like they don't give it all up front. And so there's an element of surprise a little later on. And these elements, I think, even though they're not context, or the context doesn't transfer from grade 9 to grade 12, but I think the elements of withholding information and surprise transfer. So like when you think about lessons in grade 12, when you're thinking about factor theorem and remainder theorem and sketching functions and using the transformations to kind of do all that, it's very abstract. But we want to think, how can I withhold a little bit of the information and the surprise or the actual big idea here and have it kind of slowly come out? And how can I put my students in situations where they don't have that, but they're like, how can I get more of that information? Or maybe it's like, how can I get a better solution than what I've done? Because what I've done is just so overwhelming and so tedious, but there's got to be a better way. Like there's these moments where it's like, kids, just help me, give me something more so that I can keep going. So that's what I try to think about when I'm grade 12 and starting those lessons. But I'm going to throw it back to you about what you think about that. And maybe does that spark any ideas right now about the topics that you're working on, factor theorem, remainder theorem?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And this is why it's great to talk to you guys, because kind of much like when I've seen Peter, it's like, you're putting together the ideas that I have flown around, the things that I'm sort of thinking of and making it a little more solid. And when I said that I had a great success the other day doing a breakout group, when I think about it, when I reflect on it, that's exactly what I did. I did a very vague introduction. So I was withholding information and we were talking about slopes of secants and tangents. And I just gave them a scenario of you're driving along and you set your cruise control and then you hit traffic, and just before you get to the place you want to get to, you get pulled over and the cop says that you're speeding. And then we talk about, I say, could you be speeding? Could you not be speeding? And then I start to give them more little bits of information, and it really worked. I was really pleased with it because you could see them on the Jamboard. They were putting little sticky notes and, well, what if this? Well, what if that? And that's exactly what I wanted. So then I was able to give them little bits and little bits of information. So I like that idea, and I'm thinking more about that plan I need to implement in other lessons and do that more consciously. This was almost like it was kind of conscious, but I did it last year, this lesson, and I was searching through my stuff. I'm like, do I have it written down? Oh, thank goodness I did. But But yeah, to be more conscious about that, I think that's what I'm going to aim for.
I love it. I love it. And as you're mentioning, you're using some of these tasks and there's these elements that are happening. And John sort of referenced this idea that oftentimes we get sucked into the idea that like showing a video is what makes kids curious about it. And really at the end of the day, it's about getting kids wondering like what's going on here. And I find that when we get into more complex material, as we move up the grade levels, we tend to move away from that. And I don't know if it's just simply because even conceptually, us as educators, oftentimes we learned much of this material very procedurally. And we might still be working through in our mind, like how things worked or how it develops, but really thinking about why are we teaching this concept? Not because we're going to apply it in our everyday lives or when is a student ever going to use it? Not like that, but what about this concept are we actually trying to elicit here? And what's the question that I can introduce that's going to get kids kind of wondering, like what's going on? And it might not be contextual. And the problem that pops into my mind, we'll put it in the show notes, is magic rectangle. And while it doesn't necessarily apply directly to, let's say, grade 12, it is something that does come up as we get into more abstract algebra. And this idea of completing the square is one of these ideas. It seems like when we get into more complex situations that are more abstract, we tend to resort back to this gradual release of responsibility approach, right? Where we sort of pre-teach it, we state the learning goal up front, and then we say, okay, here's example one. It's like an easy one. And we kind of turn to that more traditional sense of, I'm going to teach you, and then you're going to try some examples afterwards. Whereas if we actually think about completing the square, for example, and we go to one of those problems in the textbook that usually we don't get to until kids have done enough of these naked problems where it's just like, hey, just complete the square, complete the square, complete the square. And then finally we get to the word problems. When you look at the word problems and you go, how can I take this problem and how can I give it or give enough of the information for kids to start estimating about it? And then also to help them sort of uncover or emerge the strategy or the method that they would need to use in order to really uncover this new topic, it's really mind-blowing. And this magic rectangle task is really just an animation of a rectangle going really thin and long, and then it almost looks like a perfect square. It's not. It's actually a rectangle. It's a little longer than it is wide. And it's kind of mesmerizing. And basically the question we're asking kids is like, when does it have the most area? And we just get them to yell out, when is it? And then from there, we kind of build this. Now they're curious and we start giving them a little bit of information and kind of almost breadcrumbing them down this path where all of a sudden, oh my gosh, next thing you know, we're using algebra tiles and they're doing this thing that we'll later name as completing the square.
Kyle, I just wanted to jump in here just to remind, I know you remember, but we pulled and created that abstract math problem because you remember we were driving home from a math conference and we were like, we wanted to get over this idea that everything had to be contextual when we made this problem. This problem we actually pulled from a grade 12 book. Whether it was a calculus book or whether it was the advanced functions book, I can't remember, but it was that common problem you see in those classes, but also in the grade 10 academic book, which is kind of like that common, there's a revenue problem. And, every time you increase the price by X $2, for every increase of price of $2, you decrease the amount of people who are going to buy by 5 people. And it was like that common, like it's a revenue problem, but every increase here, there's a decrease here. And kids were always like getting killed on that question. Like that was the one that was always asked coming back from homework.
Yeah.
And we were like, okay, I guess we just have to show them how it works. But we wanted to redesign that problem that didn't have any context, because if we can do this rectangle problem, because actually the rectangle, every time the side length increases by 2, the width decreases by 5. Like it was the exact same numbers that we use from the textbook. And so we end up, like what Kyle just shared, is we end up creating an equation for area, which ends up, it's the same as the revenue function when you do it with the other question. Then you have to complete the square or find the maximum if you're going to say use it for calculus. when you try to figure out when that square or when that profit is going to be the greatest. So it's like we design that problem just to actually take the context out of it, just so to say, hey, we don't need context to make these things curious. So a couple of the other things, Carmen, I wanted to just share with you about kind of sparking curiosity or keeping kids more engaged in, say, grade 12 class than, say, just like solve these problems. Yes, like I definitely would give full credit for Peter and also for other teachers who talk about like problem strings, where it's like,
oh, yes.
if you're trying to eventually factor different types of polynomials, you might start with some easy ones that get harder incrementally, and then they're doing them at the boards, and you can be walking around guiding them along the way and stopping the class every now and again, talking about a strategy. That's always great in an advanced functions class and a calculus class because kids will work during that time, mostly independently, and you can circulate really nicely. The other things that I like to do on a regular basis in those class is I've used 2 truths and a lie quite regularly. And then I morphed it with them to call it just truths and lies, where I say we pull up, say, a polynomial, and then I've written 2 truths, or I've written 3 statements. Some are true and some are lie, and they have to figure it out, right? And so they have to like play with the equation, put stuff in, like this point is on this function, or this has a root of this, or this has a multiplicity root of this. And they have to kind of figure those things out. And then their job is to then create their own. So then they have to create a polynomial and then the 3 statements that go with it. And then they post it around the room so that the other class, the other people in the class have to now figure out their statements, whether they're truths or lies. And that's always like this nice engaging thing that kind of keeps flow going, and students are actively engaged to do that math. And the other thing is, a great starter with abstract math is creating a which one doesn't belong.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
They're hard to create, but if you went to Mary Barrasa's site, wodb.ca, she's got some advanced function stuff in there, but definitely you can create your own which one doesn't belong. And then that starts the conversation. And then the fact that the students are talking about those ideas kind of can get things flowing so that all of a sudden it doesn't feel like you just jumped into showing them how to do stuff, because there are lessons in that course that there's probably no way about it. You're going to have to show them how to solve this problem or how to kind of use this technique.
Like we did division of polynomials today. Ugh.
Yeah, like you did division of polynomials, and then like how does that relate to the area model? And are we using area model? And then we always end up having every year I've taught that it's a big class debate of who loves the area model better, who loves dividing polynomials long division better. It's like an ongoing war every class I have. Right. It's like you're in this side or you're in this side. You can't be in both. I use Desmos a lot just for generating curiosity. You can do a lot with like hiding parts of functions, showing a whole function, not whole showing it, asking questions like that. Got a lot of Desmos activities where if you're going to do some sketching or you're drawing, like that, half that course is drawing functions and transformations. And one activity that I've kind of morphed into many activities is the matching function. So it's like, here's a function, what the base function is, but by trial and error, what can you put into this function so that it moves this one on top of that one? And because Desmos is so slick and it's so real time, when you type an equation in, kids can try to like map one function on top of the other by trying to see which transformations do what. And then you can have a discussion and a consolidation of all the different transformations and what that means for the function. So I think there's lots there to do in advanced functions to kind of round it out and generate discussion and generate some curiosity. But I think the biggest thing is thinking about those elements that actually generate curiosity and seeing how you can fit them in.
Yeah, excellent. Those are some fantastic ideas. I love Desmos. I have the which one doesn't belong actually bookmarked. So I just haven't looked at it very much. Sometimes you have so many resources and you need to actually find the time to really look at things. So yeah, those are problem strings. I love it. These are all ideas that I can see being just a little more free, I guess. I'm thinking, the which one doesn't belong. You could easily have a bunch of functions and then asking which one doesn't belong, and they can have different opinions. And it's not necessarily that there's one right answer. So that's the many entry points, all those things I really like about those ideas. And that'll allow some of those students who I know are silent, they haven't said much, and it'll hopefully allow those ones to come out a little bit and not feel so scared.
I love it. I love it. It sounds like you've got a handful of takeaways today, which is awesome.
Definitely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. And something that did pop into my mind. I was going to end it there, but when John mentioned polynomial division, I had to throw in one more link, and that's James Tanton and the Global Math Project. He does exploding dots. If you go to explodingdots.org, there's like this fascinating journey from place value all the way to basically this idea of exploding dots, super conceptual, it just feels right as students work through it. And the next thing you know, you are into polynomial division and doing it with these dots that explode. So definitely something to check out if you haven't. If I had to say and summarize everything that we've talked about today before we sign off for the day and then try to connect with you again in a few weeks' time once you get those face-to-face students in the classroom so we can check in with you and see how things are working. I think one of the biggest pieces, if I could only take one bit of learning over these 15 years that I've been in this math game trying to figure this thing out, is starting with a good, interesting question is the best way to start any lesson. If I can do that, it doesn't matter if it's visual or contextual or if it has a video or what it is. If I can get kids to kind of chew on an interesting question, it just changes everything. And I think that's one of the big pieces here. I would be super curious after you go back in with those grade 12s and you try thinking about the intentionality behind some of these pretty abstract concepts and go, okay, what's the question that I'm going to just toss to them and try to get them estimating and thinking and essentially just kind of playing with. And then almost they'll be wanting to know, like, so how do we do this? You know, now that you've got us drawn in, like, what do we do now? And that's where we get to sort of dust off the microphone and say, okay, now we can do a little bit of that teacher-led instruction as well. And hopefully they're a little more drawn in.
Yeah, I think it's so important to realize that to draw students in, there's so many different ways. And there's been that misconception, I think that's out there for, I don't know how long it's been out there, that we have to have these real world problems. And it's just doesn't always work that way. And sparking curiosity can be done in many different ways. The gradual release of information. You know, I'm now looking at some other fantastic ideas that you guys have thrown out at me. The 2 truths and a lie, like lots of ideas where it doesn't have to be, here's a real world problem. And quite frankly, some students just think that those are boring. They don't get drawn in by those at all. So to find something that'll be a hook doesn't have to be so complicated.
Well, Carmen, it has been nothing but a pleasure. Now we're 2 episodes deep here with this conversation, and I really do want to continue this conversation on. I think it's so relevant right now, and if it's okay with you, hopefully we'll be able to get another date in the calendar coming up.
Fantastic.
And we'll see how things work here. And hopefully just these conversations, we can just chew on some ideas together. I love your big takeaway that there's just so many different ways to spark curiosity. And I would love nothing more than to chat with you next time and for you to feel like, hey, your grade 12s it's almost like trickery, right? It's like I've tricked them into like wanting to talk about math, because they're definitely at a place now where they want to be cool and they might want to get good grades, but maybe they don't want to get too into it. It would be really cool if as a team here, as a unit, we can draw out some good conversations despite the online situation or a partial online situation that you find yourself in.
Yeah, exactly. Sounds great.
Awesome.
I'm looking forward to it. Woohoo.
Yeah, we are too. And thanks so much, Carmen, for joining us on this episode, and look forward to talking to you again.
Fantastic.
As always, both John and I learned so much from these Math Mentoring Moment episodes, and we are sure you do too. But in order to hang on to this new learning so it doesn't wash away like footprints in the sand, we must reflect on what we've learned. So how are you going to go about doing that? One excellent way is to ensure this learning sticks by reflecting and creating a plan for yourself to take action on something that you've heard here today.
A great way to hold yourself accountable is to write it down, or even better, share it with someone, your partner, a colleague, or a member of the Math Moment Maker community by getting over to the show notes page or into our free private Facebook group, Math Moment Makers K through 12.
And just as a reminder, the 2020 Make Math Moments Virtual Summit just ended this past weekend, but the replays are still up until November 13th, 2020. If you head on over to makemathmoments.com/summit, you can join in on the learning while there's still time.
You can even watch the replay of Marion Small's session, Think the Math, Not Do the Math, or past NCTM President Robert Q. Berry III and his session, What Does It Mean to Be an Anti-Racist Teacher of Mathematics? After November 13th, 2020, all the sessions are going to be then put into the Make Math Moments Academy for our members to gobble up all year long. If you're not a member of the Academy, you can join over at makemathmoments.com/academy.
And make sure once you're in that academy, you get 30 days free. So really nothing to lose here. Stretch out that replay time by heading over to makemathmoments.com/academy to sign up and gobble up those sessions.
If you're interested in joining us for an upcoming math mentoring moment episode, just like this one here was with Carmen, where you too can share a big math class struggle, you can apply over at makemathmoments.com/mentor. That's makemathmoments.com/mentor.
Show notes and links to resources from this episode, including downloadable transcripts, can be found at makemathmoments.com/episode 102. That's makemathmoments.com/episode 102. Well, my friends, until next time, I'm Kyle Pierce.
And I'm John Orr.
High fives for us.
And a high five for you.